All right, strap in, everyone, because today's deep dive is taking us into some seriously fascinating territory.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking secret British plots, what-ifs, and a whole lot of intrigue.
We're going to uncover British plans to, well, kind of snatch Spanish South America right from under Napoleon's nose.
That's right, early 1800s. Picture it. Napoleon's running rampant across Europe, causing global mayhem.
And Britain's trying to find any advantage they can get.
And that's where Spanish South America comes in.
Ripe with resources and strategic value, it was quite the tempting target.
It really was. And what makes this deep dive so compelling is that we're not just talking about, vague ambitions here.
Right. We have actual detailed plans.
Military strategies. A cast of characters that would make a spy novelist jealous.
Disgruntled Jesuit priests, brilliant military minds, maybe even a whisper of the Prime Minister's involvement.
Oh, juicy stuff. Okay, let's rewind the clock a bit.
To the late 1700s.
And we begin with a figure who, on the surface, seems pretty unassuming.
Sir John Cox Hipsley.
So what's his connection to all of this?
He's our key to this whole thing.
Right.
Hipsley spent years in Rome, even got to know the Pope.
Wow.
And during that time, he made some connections with some Spanish-American Jesuits who were, let's just say, not too happy with the Spanish crown.
Ah, so they were ready to dish some dirt on Spain's weaknesses in South America.
You could say that.
And what kind of intel did they have?
Well, two figures, Juan José Godoy and Juan Pablo Viscardo.
Okay.
They gave Hipsley incredibly valuable information, particularly about these Andean passes.
Andean passes.
Between Mendoza and Chile, you see.
I see. And those would become really strategically crucial later on.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. But why? Why all the fuss about some mountain passes?
Well, think of them as secret highways through the Andes.
Oh.
Control those passes, and you control movement between Argentina and Chile.
That's a huge advantage for anyone trying to control the region.
Exactly. Now, fast forward to 1800, Hipsley, fueled by all this juicy intel, he drafts a plan, and he presents it to none other than Henry Dundas.
Henry Dundas.
Yeah.
He was the Secretary of War at the time, right?
That's the one.
Okay, so what was in this initial plan? What did Hipsley propose?
The focus was on capturing Buenos Aires and Montevideo.
Two major cities.
Yeah, and he figured they would need about 10,000 men for that.
10,000, that's a sizable force.
It is, but here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The idea wasn't just to occupy those cities. Oh, no. This evolved into something much more ambitious.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Enter Sir Thomas Maitland, a brilliant military strategist.
He comes in to refine the plan.
Right, but his thinking takes a radical turn. He shifts from this idea of limited occupation to, get this, the complete emancipation of Spanish America.
Whoa, hold on a minute.
It's a big jump.
That's a huge escalation.
It is.
Going from grabbing a couple of cities to liberating an entire continent. What sparked that kind of change?
Maitland, he realized that to really cripple Spain, to achieve lasting dominance in South America, Britain needed to target the source of their wealth and power.
Which was?
Peru.
Peru, of course.
He believed that by seizing Peru, not only would they strike a huge economic blow to Spain, but it would also trigger uprisings all across the continent.
So instead of just picking at the edges, he wanted to go straight for the heart.
Exactly. His strategy involved this coordinated assault on multiple fronts.
Okay, how so?
Simultaneous strikes on Buenos Aires and Caracas to distract the Spanish forces, you see.
Keeping them busy.
While the main event was unfolding elsewhere.
I get it. So how did he plan on getting to Peru? It's on the other side of the continent, and we're talking about the early 1800s. No airplanes or anything.
Right. Well, his plan was, bold, to say the least.
Okay.
He proposed assembling a force, 3,000 infantry, and 400 cavalry.
A lot of people.
Yeah, drawn from England and India, and they would converge on Valparaiso in Chile.
And from there?
From there, they would use those strategically vital Andean passes we talked about.
The secret highways.
Yep, marching from Mendoza into Chile, and eventually they'd advance toward Peru.
Wow. Crossing the Andes with an army?
Right.
That's still a logistical nightmare today.
Right. Maitland was seriously considering this. It shows how ambitious he was.
Absolutely. But there's more to this than just brute force, right?
Oh, definitely.
Maitland, he was a strategist.
Very much so.
He knew he had to plan for the long term and win over the locals.
Exactly. In fact, he was actually against an immediate all-out assault on Lima.
Really?
Even though it was the heart of Peru's wealth and power.
That's surprising. Why not go straight for it?
He had some concerns. For one, the tropical diseases. He knew they could take a heavy toll on his troops.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But even more importantly, he understood that if the British came in and were seen as just another plundering force,
Yeah.
that would alienate the local population.
And they'd lose any chance of establishing any lasting control.
Exactly. So his approach was more nuanced. Instead of just grabbing resources, he wanted to create alliances, a system that would benefit both Britain and the region in the long run.
A long-term strategy?
Right. So if not Lima, what was the key to his plan?
That's what I want to know.
Chile.
Chile?
He recognized how strategically important it was.
How so?
Well, its location, for one thing. It gave them control over the grain supplies to Peru.
Ah, I see.
And it could be a vital base for coordinating with the forces coming from Buenos Aires.
Okay.
Maitland even envisioned forming alliances with the indigenous groups in Chile,
Interesting.
who already weren't too fond of the Spanish, which would further bolster their campaign.
Smart. So basically, controlling Chile gave them the leverage they needed to eventually secure Peru and, in turn, the whole continent.
Exactly.
Wow. So Maitland, it sounds like he had a pretty well-thought-out strategy,
He did.
combining military might with a real understanding of local dynamics.
Right.
Did he have any doubts about his plan?
He was confident, absolutely confident. He believed this plan would dismantle the Spanish colonial system,
Wow.
establish British dominance.
Economically, you mean?
Yes, and secure a strong naval presence for Britain in the region.
But as we know, history has a way of throwing curveballs.
It certainly does.
And in this case, the fate of Maitland's ambitious plan rested on the political situation back in Britain.
Things were a bit shaky back home.
So what was going on in Britain that could derail such a meticulously crafted plan?
Well, in 1801, Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger, who was a big supporter of this whole South America venture,
Right.
he resigns.
Oh, wow.
And that triggers a whole chain of events.
Like what?
It leads to the impeachment of Dundas.
Dundas. But he was the one who was championing this plan.
Exactly. He was closely tied to Pitt, and they charged him with misappropriation of funds.
That's a serious accusation.
It was. Put his whole career in jeopardy.
And did he?
He was eventually acquitted.
Oh.
But all this political turmoil essentially put Maitland's grand strategy on hold.
So the mastermind behind this plan is out of the picture.
For now.
Does that mean British ambitions in South America were completely abandoned?
Not entirely. British interest in South America, it was still simmering.
Okay, so it wasn't completely off the table.
No, not at all. And Dundas, remember him?
Oh, yeah, the guy who was really pushing for intervention.
He makes a comeback in 1804.
He dies.
Back in a position of influence. And guess what?
South America was still on his mind.
Oh, absolutely. It was still very much on his agenda.
This guy's persistent, I'll give him that. But if Maitland's plan was on hold,
Right.
who was going to lead the charge now?
Remember that name I mentioned, Sir Home Popham?
Popham.
Yeah, vaguely.
This is where things get really interesting. Dundas reconnects with Popham.
Okay.
And Popham, along with this Venezuelan revolutionary named Francisco de Miranda, they had been cooking up their own plan.
Hold on. So there's a whole new plan in motion now.
You could say that.
Tell me more about this Popham-Miranda duo. Okay, so Popham, he's the same guy who would later lead that controversial invasion of Buenos Aires.
Right.
And Miranda, he was quite a character,
Mm-hmm.
a Venezuelan revolutionary who spent years traveling the world trying to drum up support for independence
For Venezuela.
for his homeland. Yeah, he's considered a forerunner to those South American liberators who would come later.
Wow, that's fascinating. So they both wanted to liberate South America from Spain.
They did.
But their approaches were probably pretty different.
They were, their motivations too, which made their relationship, well, complicated.
I can imagine.
Miranda, he was a real visionary, committed to this idea of a united and independent South America.
He sounds like quite the idealist.
He was. He even designed a flag for this future nation.
No way, really.
It actually looks a lot like the modern Venezuelan flag.
It's amazing to think these ideas of South American independence, they go back that far.
They do.
What about Popham? What was driving him?
Well, he definitely saw the strategic and economic value of seizing Spanish America.
Of course.
But some historians argue that he was also, motivated by personal glory.
Uh-huh. So bit of ambition in the mix.
Maybe a desire to prove himself as a military leader.
Makes sense. And that difference in priorities, it probably caused some friction between him and Miranda.
Oh, it did. But their plan, it was bold, multifaceted, aimed at hitting multiple key points in Spanish America.
Okay, lay it on me. What did this new plan entail?
Okay, so Miranda, He would lead an invasion of Venezuela,
Okay.
striking at the heart of Spanish power in the north.
Right.
And at the same time, Popham would target Buenos Aires.
To gain a foothold in the south.
Exactly, establish a base there, and the ultimate goal was for their forces to converge and march on Lima.
So 2 simultaneous invasions, multiple targets, and a final showdown in Lima. This is like something out of an action movie.
It was quite the plan, and Dundas, he was on board,
Yeah.
enthusiastic about it, but timing, as they say, is everything.
Oh, I know that all too well.
The conflict in Europe was escalating.
With Napoleon.
Yeah, his ambitions were growing, and Britain had to prioritize, focus their resources elsewhere.
So another ambitious plan put on hold because of Napoleon.
You could say that.
It makes you wonder what would happen if he hadn't been such a disruptive force.
It does, doesn't it?
But what about this Papa Miranda scheme?
Yep.
Did it ever actually happen?
In a way, yes, but not as they initially planned.
Oh.
In 1806, Popham, he was actually en route to South Africa.
Okay.
He makes this, controversial decision.
What did he do?
He deviates from his orders and launches a surprise attack on Buenos Aires.
Wait, he just went rogue. Invaded a Spanish colony without authorization.
It was a bold move and ultimately a costly one.
How so?
Well, he had some vague instructions, some flexibility depending on the circumstances.
Okay.
But attacking Buenos Aires was a serious overreach of his authority.
So this audacious gamble, did it pay off?
At first, yes.
Really?
He managed to capture Buenos Aires with a relatively small force.
Wow.
But his victory, it was short-lived.
Oh, no.
Spanish forces retook the city a few months later.
Ouch.
And Popham, he was recalled to Britain.
For a stern talking to.
He was court-martialed for exceeding his orders.
Wow, what a roller coaster. Daring capture, swift defeat, court-martial. What a story.
It is, isn't it?
But what about Miranda? Did he ever get his part of the plan off the ground?
He did try, yeah. In 1806, he attempted to invade Venezuela. Unfortunately, his expedition was poorly funded.
Oh, that's never a good sign.
And it ultimately failed.
That's too bad.
He was actually captured by the Spanish in 1812.
Oh, no.
And died in prison a few years later.
That's a sad end for someone who dedicated his life to South American independence.
It is.
So despite all these intricate plans and daring schemes, British efforts to seize Spanish America, they just fizzled out.
In the immediate sense, yes.
Okay.
But it's important to remember this was a period of massive global upheaval.
The Napoleonic Wars.
Exactly. They consumed a lot of Britain's attention, their resources.
So South America, it was just too much of a distraction at that point.
Yeah, you could say that. But even though these plans didn't succeed,
Right.
they're still significant.
How so?
They exposed the vulnerabilities of the Spanish colonial system
Ah, I see.
and helped to fuel that growing discontent within Spanish America.
Right. Remember those Jesuit priests Hipsley met in Rome?
Yeah.
Their grievances, the information they provided, it all played a role in sparking these ambitious plans.
Absolutely. It's like a chain reaction.
Their words plant a seed. The seed grows into these plans, and even though those plans fail,
Right.
they still contribute to weakening Spain's grip. They inspire future revolutionaries,
Exactly. They act as a catalyst.
speeding up a process that was maybe already in motion,
They helped to shift the balance of power, embolden those who wanted independence.
and showed that Spanish rule wasn't invincible.
Right.
So these failed plans, they were kind of a prelude to the wars of independence that would sweep across South America a few years later.
You could see it that way. They provide crucial context for understanding those later movements.
They exposed the cracks in the empire, gave a glimpse of what a post-Spanish South America might look like.
And fueled the flames of discontent.
It's fascinating how seemingly isolated events can have such ripple effects throughout history.
It is.
But beyond their impact on South America, what can we learn from these British schemes? What broader insights do they offer?
Well, they highlight the complexities of, imperial ambition.
How so?
It's rarely just a simple land grab.
Right.
These plans were driven by a mix of economic motives, geopolitical rivalries,
Sure.
and even, in some cases, a belief in the superiority of British values and systems.
Interesting.
They also remind us that history is full of these what-if moments.
They could have completely changed the course of events.
Exactly.
It's true. What if Pitt hadn't resigned? What if Popham hadn't gone rogue? Would those British plans have worked? Would South America have achieved independence under Britain's watch?
We can only speculate.
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's fascinating to consider the possibilities.
That's what makes history so captivating.
It's not just about memorizing dates and names.
No, it's about grappling with the complexity.
Exploring different perspectives.
And understanding the consequences of actions, often unintended ones.
You've given us a lot to think about, but before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on one more thing.
Sure.
We've mainly focused on the British perspective.
Right.
But I'm curious, how do you think these events were perceived by the people of South America? Did they want British intervention? Or were they wary of just trading one colonial master for another?
It's a good question, and one that historians are still kind of grappling with.
Yeah.
It's important to remember South America back then, it wasn't a single entity.
Right, different groups, different interests.
Exactly. You had diverse populations, some more loyal to Spain than others,
Yeah.
different economic interests, and, a whole range of perspectives on what a future without Spain would even look like.
So there wasn't like a clear-cut pro-independence or pro-Spain sentiment.
Not really. Some people, particularly the Creole elites, they resented the Spanish, the restrictions on their economic and political power.
Yeah.
They might have seen British intervention as a way to gain more autonomy, more self-determination.
But others were probably wary of British motives.
Oh, absolutely. Some feared they'd just be replacing one colonial master with another.
Which is understandable. I mean, they'd already experienced centuries of European colonialism.
Right. They wouldn't want to just trade one set of problems for another.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about the indigenous populations.
Right.
They had their own complex relationships with both Spain and Britain.
They had suffered under Spanish rule.
Yeah, but there was no guarantee that British rule would be any better.
It's a good reminder that history is never simple.
It's never black and white.
There are always multiple perspectives, different interests at play.
Absolutely. And those complexities, they're what make history so fascinating to study.
It really is. It's not just about battles and dates.
No, it's about understanding people, their motivations.
And how even the best laid plans can have unintended consequences.
That's it, exactly.
Well, I think that's a great point to wrap things up on.
I agree.
We've really dug deep into these British plans.
We have
Explored the thinking behind them.
the strategies, the motivations.
And considered their impact, both on Britain and on South America.
And on the course of history, really.
But maybe the biggest takeaway here is that history is, it's like this tapestry.
A tapestry.
Yeah, woven from so many different threads.
I like that.
Each thread representing a different perspective, a different motivation, a different outcome.
And we're constantly re-examining that tapestry.
We are.
Reinterpreting it, finding new meaning in it.
Every new piece of evidence, every new perspective, it adds another layer to our understanding of the past.
It makes it richer, more complex.
That's a great way to put it. And to our listeners, as you continue to explore history, keep asking questions, challenge those assumptions.
And seek out those diverse perspectives.
They're what make history so compelling, so relevant to our lives today.
And never underestimate the power of a good what if.
What if?
It sparks our curiosity, makes us think critically, helps us connect with the past.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into British secret plans for South America.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll continue exploring the endless possibilities of history with us.
Until next time.
Until next time.